This day in sports history. It's June 24th, and on this day in 1992, the Dream Team lost. The 1992 men's Olympic basketball team, the first U.S. team made up of pros. You got Jordan, Bird, Magic, Pippen, the Admiral, Stockton, Malone, Ewing, Barkley, Drexler, Chris Mullin, and Christian Laettner. Of the 12 players on that roster, 11 were eventually inducted into the NBA Hall of Fame. The lone man out of the 12 that did not was Laettner, who was an inductee into the Collegiate Basketball Hall of Fame. 10 of those 12 would also eventually be named to the list of the NBA's best players in the first 50 years, with Laettner and Mullin being the exclusions. They were simply unstoppable in the Olympics. Of course, they won the gold medal, winning all 8 of their games by an average margin of 44 points. But there was a team that did manage to beat the Dream Team, even though it did not count in the standings, and head coach Chuck Daly was actually happy that they did. On this day in the lead-up to the Olympic basketball competition, tipping off on July 26th, Daly brought in a group of college all-stars to scrimmage against the Dream Teamers. The camp was being held in La Jolla, California, and the collegians selected to work out with the future gold medalists were Grant Hill and Bobby Hurley out of Duke, Tennessee's Allen Houston, Kentucky's Jamal Mashburn, North Carolina's Eric Montross, Rodney Rogers from Wake Forest, Penny Hardaway from Memphis, and Michigan's Chris Webber. As soon as they got off the plane, Larry Bird was talking trash to them, telling Chris Webber, "You better get some sleep, because we're going to bust your ass tomorrow," and then telling Penny Hardaway that it was going to be a long week. So this was the first scrimmage of several that week, and while the college guys walked into the gym a bit in awe of the guys that they had posters of hanging on their bedroom walls, well, they also came to play ball. Coached by Roy Williams and George Raveling, the select team jumped on the Dreamers early. Penny was throwing alley-oop lobs to Rodney Rogers. Allen Houston was bombing threes. Bobby Hurley pushed the pace, ran the court, finding the open man for easy buckets. On the defensive end, Webber was checking Charles Barkley. Grant Hill was guarding Jordan. Hurley got matched up against Stockton and then later Magic, and they held their own, and then some. When Daly finally blew his whistle to end the scrimmage, both teams looked up at the scoreboard, and they were surprised to see the score: college guys 62, NBA dudes 54. The scoreboard was quickly set back to zeros before an anxious media contingent were allowed into the gym. Daly was not upset about the loss, though. In fact, there is a theory that he orchestrated it somehow. He knew he had a great team, but even great men and great teams need to be humbled on occasion. Well, the next day, the NBA guys got going and rolled the select guys by 47. And that set them on course to head off to Barcelona in July to roll through the tournament and eventually beat Croatia by 32 in the gold medal game. This episode is brought to you by the Sterling Soap Company. Sterling Soap is 100% natural, and with a variety of bath soaps, shave soaps, beard balm, lotions, cologne, and many more personal care products in a large variety of scents, you're sure to find something that's perfect for you or that special someone in your life. Check them out at sterlingsoap.com. On this day in 1980, it was a really bad idea pulled off by a guy who was kind of known for them. Ted Stepien was the owner of the Cleveland Cavaliers at this point, and if you're a fan of the show or know about his time as owner of the Cavs, then you'll know that the NBA created a rule called the Stepien Rule that prevents NBA teams from trading first-round picks in back-to-back years. And a few things to know before we talk about the stupid thing that happened on this day. Stepien was also the owner of a professional slow-pitch softball team in Cleveland known as the Competitors. Snazzy name, Ted. Also, the city of Cleveland was quite proud of the Terminal Tower. Opened in 1930, the 54-story building was the second tallest in the country until 1964. So now, 50 years down the road, city officials wanted to do something to commemorate a half-century of business in the Terminal Tower and wanted to toss softballs off the observation deck. Sounds a bit strange, but there actually was a precedent. Back in 1938, the Cleveland Indians had pulled off a similar stunt with a player 700 feet above and two of their catchers down below waiting to catch a baseball. And there were a couple of balls caught back in 38, and so the city folks thought, hey, it'd be a great idea to commemorate this, and they asked the Indians to do it again. Well, seeing the idiocy of such a dangerous stunt, there was little hesitation in answering no. So the city officials turned to Stepien, who, not seeing anything wrong with the idea, said yes. On this day, Stepien made his way to the observation deck, 700 feet in the air, with several of his players cordoned off below, ready to catch one of the dropped bullets. 5,000 folks were on hand for some reason to watch it, and several, no doubt, wished that they had not been there. Stepien's first toss was too far away from the building and ended up hitting a car, causing some damage. Toss number 2 hit a guy in the shoulder. He wasn't hurt badly enough to be taken to the hospital, but maybe saner heads should have stepped in at that point and stopped the madness. Instead, toss number 3 was even worse. It ended up hitting a woman in the hand, breaking her wrist. Did they stop then? They did not. Ball number 4, thankfully, just hit the pavement, and ball number 5 was finally caught by a guy with a glove. Stepien laid the blame on city officials for not allowing them to practice before the event, but was eventually sued by the injured woman and paid out a settlement. Maybe it wasn't ill-advised, more like a the world wasn't ready for it yet kind of moment. On this day in 1985, American tennis player Ann White debuted an all-white bodysuit, or what might be referred to as a catsuit, to play her first-round match against Pam Shriver. White warmed up in a tracksuit prior to the match, and it wasn't until just before the first serve that she peeled off the tracksuit to reveal her skin-tight white bodysuit. After splitting 2 sets, weather forced play to be postponed. White was told her outfit was inappropriate and told to change when they returned to resume play the next day. She lost the 3rd set and never wore the bodysuit for a match again. The outfit did not make a return to the court at all until 2018, when Serena Williams wore an all-black catsuit at the French Open. It was once again met with derision by officials who banned them after the tournament ended. On this day in 2007, it was a watershed moment for the U.S. men's national team. So yesterday we talked about the Landon Donovan goal in stoppage time to beat Algeria in the 2010 World Cup to win the game and the group stage. Well, for any great moment like that, there are building block moments that may happen a day, a week, a month, or even years before that put an individual or a team on a certain trajectory. And you can certainly make the argument that what happened on this day in 2007 had zero bearing on what happened in the 2010 World Cup. But hear me out on this one. This is the Gold Cup CONCACAF final between the U.S. and Mexico, or El Tri as they are also referred to. The U.S. are still a bit shell-shocked from their disappointing 2006 World Cup appearance, where they did not win a game. Mexico took a 1-0 lead and held that until Landon Donovan scored on a penalty kick in the 62nd minute. And then in the 73rd minute, the U.S. had a corner kick that Donovan took and he put into the 18. It was headed by a defender and popped up in the air outside the 18. Benny Fellhaber saw the ball coming his way and knew what he was going to do with it. Donovan saw Fellhaber lining up a shot and was screaming, "No, no, no!" 100 yards away, U.S. keeper Tim Howard could see what Fellhaber was setting up for as well and had the same thought as Landon. Don't shoot, possess the ball, pass it wide. But Fellhaber did not hear any of that. But then again, he had a history of doing things others thought he couldn't. He walked on at UCLA, played in the Bundesliga, made the national team, but in all fairness to Donovan and Howard, the shot Fellhaber was lining up and getting ready to take was a low percentage shot. But he struck the volley perfectly, and his shot arced beautifully into the back of the net.
Wednesday, the lower divisions of England, the volley! Yes! Yes! Benny Fellhaber! 73rd minute! Benny with his Jets! 2-1 USA!
It is one of the best goals you will ever see. and it was surely one of the best goals scored by a U.S. player in an international match. Fellhaber's goal gave the U.S. the 2-1 advantage, and thanks to some Golden Glove work by Timmy Howard, the U.S. held on to win the Gold Cup title. Now, how did that figure into the 2010 World Cup? Well, the Gold Cup title they won on this day qualified them for the 2009 Confederations Cup tournament. That eventually led to a game against heavily favored Spain that the U.S. won 2-0. Everybody who was involved with the success the U.S. men had at the 2010 World Cup know that the win on this day, 3 years earlier, aided by Benny Fellhaber's goal, played a pivotal role in that success. On this day in 1921, golfer Bobby Jones was a 19-year-old amateur playing in the Open Championship at St Andrews in Scotland. His first 2 rounds had gone pretty well. An opening round 78 and a second round 74 put him in contention, 5 shots behind the leader. His third round, however, did not go well. After making the turn in a disappointing 46, he made a double bogey on number 10 and then found himself in some trouble on the 11th. He wound up in one of those cavernous bunkers that Scottish courses are well known for, and it took him 4 shots to extricate his ball from it. That effort frustrated Jones, who, when he was remembering it years later, admitted that the wonders of Scottish-style links golf were perplexing to him at that point. He was not a fan of St Andrews, and he had no appreciation for its subtle difficulties. After putting out for another 6 at the 11th, Jones tore up his scorecard and stormed off the course. He lamented that move years later, saying it was his petulant, youthful nature. But the man that would come to epitomize style and grace on the golf course later in his career returned to the British Isles in 1926, and he won at Royal Lytham and St Anne's, a tournament I'll talk about in a few days that included an incredible shot that led to a plaque being placed in the spot he struck it from. And then he came back to play St Andrews in 1927, and he won for the 2nd straight year. On this day in 1977, Eddie Stankey stepped down as manager of the Texas Rangers. Now, that doesn't seem like much of a story on the face of it. The night before, Stankey had managed his team to a 10-8 win over the Minnesota Twins. In fact, he had a winning record as the Rangers manager. But what makes this story unusual is that Stankey stepped down after managing just 1 game for the Rangers. He had been lured away from the collegiate ranks to take the place of Frank Lucchese. But after a sleepless night and knowing he had made a mistake, he called his wife and told her he was coming back home. He then told a stunned Rangers front office he was resigning. He was given his old job back as the baseball coach at the University of South Alabama. Stankey, who had coached the Jaguars since 1969, said he got homesick and just needed to go back home. The Rangers hired Connie Ryan on an interim basis to fill the newly vacated spot. And on this day in 1968, Detroit Tiger outfielder Jim Northrup joined a rare fraternity when he hit a pair of grand slams in 1 game. He came up in the 5th against Cleveland's Eddie Fisher and blasted his first grand slam. Then, in the 6th, he hit his 2nd off of relief pitcher Bill Rohr. At this point, it was only the 2nd time in Major League history that a batter hit grand slams in consecutive innings. The Tigers won 14-3. And time now for today's That's Got Nothing to Do with Sports fun fact. Brazil is a pretty large country, but did you know that the northernmost tip of Brazil is actually closer to Canada than its own southern border? This has been an original Thrive Suite production.